Harsh winter weather, politics, traffic, high cost of living, taxes. These are just a few of the things that you need to consider before you decide to move to Chicago, Illinois. So if you're thinking about making the move, you've weighed all your options and you decided that Chicago is the place to be, well, make sure you can handle these 10 things before you move here. Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jordan Pyle and I'm your go-to Chicago real estate agent. My team and I have serviced the city of Chicago for the last 11 years. We've helped hundreds of clients and we would love the opportunity to talk about your real estate strategy in order to achieve your goals. So if you need our help, feel free to just reach out to our team at the number on the screen. You can text that number and a team member or myself will get in touch within 24 hours. Additionally, before you go, if you want to be in the know about all things Chicago, we send out a bi-weekly newsletter. You can find the information down in the description. All right, let's get into it. So I've been in Chicago over 11 years and there's definitely so many pros to living in Chicago. But if you're thinking about moving here, which a lot of the people that are reaching out to our team are moving from a different city, well, you just need to kind of take into consideration all of the different pros and cons to make sure that you can handle all the things about living in a beautiful big city like Chicago. You know, with any big city, there's going to be a ton of pros, but with any big city, there's also the cons that you need to think about. We're going to dive into each one of these and we're going to talk about why these things are great in Chicago, but then also give you the flip side so that you can make sure you're making the best educated decision. So without further ado, let's get into number one, talking about the weather. All right, so I've said this time and time again on this channel, but there is a certain time of the year in Chicago where I think Chicago is frankly the best place in the entire world, and that is about June through August. So we consider this our 100 days of summer. Weather is absolutely gorgeous. You know, it's a very active lifestyle. There's people out on the lakefront, there's street festivals, there's concerts. There are literally so many things to do, and the city is absolutely buzzing this time of year. And that being said, there's other great times of the year, but these 100 days of summer are really where you want to be in Chicago. And it allows you to put up with some of the other months of the year where the weather's not so great. And so before you move to Chicago, you just need to know that there are about half of the year where the weather is, you know, subpar, and then about half the year where the weather is absolutely fantastic. And so usually for us, we see the weather change, you know, kind of in that like right now-ish time, like, you know, mid-October to late October, we start to see that transition right around Halloween where the weather starts getting colder. And then basically from that point forward through Thanksgiving, through Christmas, through the end of the year, all the way through about, I don't know, call it March, April, and maybe even into May, well, you're gonna have kind of terrible weather, if we're just gonna put it frankly. In that, you know, if you're an outdoors person and you like to be outside every single day, well, this is something like myself, that's me. You know, I like to be out on the lakefront running, I like to be active, being outside, enjoying the weather, taking in the fresh air. And this is something that's been a little bit challenging for me to get used to, but the benefit of this is that as soon as the weather starts to change, the city opens up like a flower and it's just absolutely incredible. And you really take advantage of that time and you don't take it for granted. And so while you may be moving to Chicago because you actually want the seasons, if you're not really wanting that cold, you know, inclement weather during about 4 to 6 months out of the year, well, you may want to consider if Chicago is right for you. All right, number 2 on the list, we're talking about politics. Anywhere you live, there's going to be people that are on one side of the fence with different policies. There's going to be people on the other side of the fence. And my opinion is you just have to kind of take in both sides and make the best decision for you and your family. While there's a lot of things I agree with how Chicago has been run, well, there's also a lot of political corruption in the city. And so we've been struggling with this for a while. I feel like Chicago's probably been one of those cities where you hear about the politics, you hear about bad leadership, you know, you hear about a lot of different improvements, you know, high taxes in the city, different mayors that, you know, are just not getting the job done. So if politics is important to you and you want to be in a city where things are all in order, which is never any city, you know, you're never going to find that perfect city that everything just lines up perfectly for you. What I will say though is Chicago is more of a liberal state. You know, it's more of a voting blue state versus a red state. So just know if you're moving to Chicago and you are super conservative, well, Chicago might not be the place for you, and that's just the fact. All right, number 3 on the list, we're talking about traffic. If you're moving here and you hate traffic, well, you may want to reconsider, because what happens in Chicago, and I think Chicago comes in pretty much every year in the top 3 of the worst cities for traffic in the United States. But what I've just noticed is that you have months of the year where snow's on the ground, you know, rain, whatever those different kind of the inclement weather is, at these off seasons, I'll call them, winter, late fall, early spring. And once everything opens up, that's when all the construction on the road starts. And so for various different reasons, whether it be weather, rain, snow, new developments going on in the city where they're closing down roads and doing work on the roads, or just general road construction, when the weather gets nice, traffic is just an issue. And so if you're on the expressway, trying to get to and from, the north or south side of the city, if you're commuting from the city to the suburbs or from the suburbs back to the city, well, you just need to take into consideration how much time that's going to take you to get to and from. And so if you're commuting every single day, just expect it to be, if you're in rush hour traffic, at least an hour to get out to the suburbs and an hour to get back. If you're going to O'Hare, for example, to get to the airport, I typically like to leave around like 5 a.m., 6 a.m. and take that really early flight, because then it's like a 25 or 30 minute drive from where I live in Lincoln Park to O'Hare. And there's obviously Midway Airport as well, but just as a kind of a frame of reference, that same commute, that's 25 or 30 minutes at, call it 5:30 in the morning, if you were going at 8 a.m., that may take you an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes. So this is just something you're gonna wanna consider, is getting from the city to the suburbs, and then really kind of going like east to west in the city, I find to be very challenging. And so this is just something you're gonna wanna take into consideration if you're going to have a car, or if you're gonna be commuting via Uber or something like that, to and from work or to and from your daily conveniences. All right, number 4 on the list, you want to consider cost of living. And what I love about Chicago, and what a lot of people that reach out that have bought homes with our team from another state or another city this year, they're coming to Chicago because the cost of living is actually good compared to other large metropolitan cities. So comparing it to, cities such as Miami, or maybe New York or Boston or San Francisco or LA, and other areas of the country like that, Chicago is actually the most affordable large metropolitan city in the country. And so even though compared to the national average, Chicago is more expensive in most cases, whether it be housing or cost of goods or other things that kind of go into your day-to-day life and the expenses that it costs you to actually live in a city, Chicago comes in actually a lot cheaper than these other large metropolitans. So any big city you live in, it's going to be more expensive than if you're living in somewhere more rural. But just know that Chicago is considered a very affordable city, and your money will go a lot further than if you're in one of these other coastal big cities around the country. However, if you're wanting to live a very frugal lifestyle, you're wanting to really drive your expenses down as low as possible, Chicago just might not be the city for you. And that doesn't mean that you can't be around Chicago. Maybe you decide to go to the Chicago suburbs instead, where your money goes a little bit further. And so all these things considered, this is just something that you're wanting to take into consideration and making sure that you can handle this before you move to Chicago. All right, number 5 on the list, we're talking about the housing market. And on that note, our team has been servicing the city of Chicago, as I mentioned before, for the last 11 years. If you have any questions, or this video is making you want to actually get into the market to buy or sell a home in Chicago, text the number on the screen and we can definitely help you out. But on that note, the housing market is actually the 5th thing you want to consider before you move here. And really where I'm going to go with this one, and we could go a lot of different directions, but rents are at all-time highs. The housing market in general is at an all-time high. That doesn't just mean Chicago, but what I notice about Chicago is that there's just no inventory. So if you're moving here and you're looking to buy a home, and I shouldn't say there's no inventory, but for most markets in the city, there's not a lot of inventory. The ones that you're maybe considering, such as the Lincoln Parks, the Lakeviews, the West Towns, the Wicker Park, Bucktown, West Loop, those neighborhoods, there's just a shortage of inventory. And so it's become a very competitive market, and there's not a lot of great deals out there. But on the flip side, it's kind of a tale of two cities, right? If you're in the downtown dense, like high-rise market, if I name a few neighborhoods like River North or Streeterville, or maybe the Loop or the Gold Coast, well, these markets actually tend to be more of a buyer's market. And so there's a lot more inventory, a lot longer days on market, a lot more motivated sellers. It just depends if you want that lifestyle or if you want something a little bit more private, where you get a little bit more space, such as like a Lincoln Park, a little bit more neighborhood friendly. Those markets are going to be competitive right now. And so just something you want to consider if you're coming here and buying in the market, especially if you're buying in the spring of this coming year in 2025. If you're thinking about buying anywhere between January and call it June, just know you're going to be buying in the most competitive time of the year. And so this doesn't mean that you can't get a good house, but it might mean that you're not going to get a great deal. However, interest rates are hopefully going to keep coming down. The election has now passed. This video is being filmed 2 days after the election. President Trump is now in office. For whatever that means, in general, people wait to make big buying and selling decisions until after an election during election years. And so now that there's some clarity, not necessarily certainty, but at least now that there's some clarity about what's happening in the White House, now people are going to start jumping into the market. So my recommendation, if you're thinking about moving here in the next, call it 6 months, the earlier the better, so that you can get into this market and secure a good deal. All right, number 6 on the list, things you want to consider. Well, we got to talk about crime. And as you know on this channel, I don't go super into detail, but I want to point it out because it is one of the major considerations that you're going to want to make before you move here. And so depending on where you're at in the city, there's going to be different crime rates and different things that you need to kind of be aware of and kind of keep your head on a swivel for. And so what I'm going to urge you to do, as I always do, is go on to the local police department website, look up crime data and statistics, and just kind of make your best judgment. And what I always say is that anywhere you are in a big city, you just need to be careful. Don't be getting yourself into things that you shouldn't be. Making sure you're being very aware of your surroundings. When you're walking at night, make sure that you're focused on where you're walking, not having your head in your phone, or not leaving your car running with the door unlocked. There are different things such as carjackings. There's other crimes. There's things that are happening in the city every single day. Of course, there's the things that every other city has too, which are the more severe crimes. But with all that being said, I think what I've noticed is that crime is going to be prevalent in every city across the country, but you do want to take into consideration and do your own research before you move to Chicago, because there is a little bit more of an elevated crime level in the city. Number 7 on the list, we're talking about people. So Chicago's got a huge population. I think in the city of Chicago, don't quote me exactly, but I think we're around like 2.5 to 3 million people. And then once you include the Chicagoland area, it's much, much more than that. And so if you're wanting a more quiet lifestyle, you're not wanting to be around a ton of people, you're not wanting the beautifulness of the melting pot that is Chicago, and you just want to be a hermit and not make any friends, then maybe Chicago's not the place for you. And I say that in a joking way. I mean, obviously, if you're thinking about moving to Chicago, you know what the population is and what the people are like. And so I would just recommend that you do your research, you figure out, how busy is too busy for you? Do you want to be more on a tree-lined street in Chicago where you get a little bit of that more private feel, but having close proximity to the busier areas of the city? Or do you want to be right down in the middle of it all in the city center? And so these are just some different decisions that you will have to make before you move here. But if you're not a big fan of people, well, Chicago may not be the place for you. Number 8 on the list is the lifestyle, and specifically a fast-paced lifestyle. And so I always say Chicago is a very working city, and it's something that really was exciting to me and still is today when I first moved to Chicago back in 2013. And this is because I was a young 23-year-old fresh out of college. I was getting my real estate license, and I was excited about abundance and opportunity and just the general energy and the aura of the city. People are waking up every single day. They're going out and they're hustling, and they're going to try to provide for themselves and their family. They're advancing in their careers. They're advancing in their personal lives. They're growing their families. And it's just a very cool energy to be around. It gives me chills to this day, because I think for young people specifically, that's what you want, right? You want to be immersed in an environment where you are going to have other people around you that are hustling for their goals and going after all their dreams. And I know that that's how I was. And so that may change over time, and maybe you want to reconsider Chicago because you're maybe not into that fast pace. You want a little bit of a slower lifestyle. You can find that lifestyle in and around Chicago. Maybe you go, to maybe one of like the outskirts markets of the city where you're not downtown specifically. Maybe you're even going out to the suburb where you can get a yard, you can get a garage, and you can have some of these things that feel like a slower day-to-day lifestyle. But if you're wanting to be in the city of Chicago and most of the neighborhoods that our team services, well, just know it's going to be a very fast-paced environment. And for you, that's your decision whether that's something you love or something you hate. Number 9 on the list, we're talking about taxes. And this is honestly one of the worst parts about Chicago for me. And property taxes are one of the highest in the country. You have taxes on pretty much everything. You even have a bag tax when you go to the grocery store. So I don't know if that's new for anyone else, but we've had that for several years now. I think it's like 7 cents for a bag when you go to the grocery. It's just the city uses taxes as a way to fund political initiatives and different infrastructure initiatives in the city. And a lot of people just don't like the fact that taxes are through the roof in Chicago. So it's one of the highest tax cities in the country. So if you're not into taxes and you don't want to be in a high tax environment, well, Chicago's probably not for you. All right, finally, number 10, if you hate sports, well, you may want to reconsider Chicago, because Chicago is sports fanatics day in and day out. I think we have 6 professional sports teams. You have the Chicago Cubs, Chicago White Sox, Chicago Bears, Chicago Blackhawks, Chicago Bulls, and then I believe Chicago Fire would be the 6th, which is the soccer team here. And every day, every season, every week, there's something sports related that's going on, which if you're a sports fan, could be one of the greatest things. But if you're just not really into that and you're not really, getting on the bandwagon of following different sports teams and rooting for them and going to games, and you definitely don't have to do that. I'm a sports fan, but I'm definitely not a fanatic. And I kind of just found my way of figuring out, how involved I wanted to be. And what I will say is, even though I'm not a huge sports fan, I played baseball my whole life growing up. And one of the first few years that I lived in Chicago was 2016 to win the Chicago Cubs finally won the World Series, and then also the Chicago Blackhawks, our NHL team, both won, they won the Stanley Cup, and then the Cubs won the World Series. That was one of the coolest experiences of my life. Just seeing the city rally around the sports teams is honestly a big unifier for the city. And so when we're doing well in one of the sports teams, the city seems to kind of get behind it. And it also creates a lot of cool things and fun things to do with your friends and your family, going out and catching a game or going to a bar to watch these things on the TV. And so in general, if sports is your thing, Chicago might be a great fit for you. If you absolutely hate sports, well, you may want to reconsider Chicago. So that sums it up. Those are the 10 things that you need to consider and make sure that you can handle before you move to Chicago in 2025. I hope this has been valuable to you. Please do us a favor. If this content every single week when we're putting out videos has been valuable, do us a favor and like the video, comment down below, subscribe to our channel, share this with a friend, and definitely turn on the notifications so you can catch all of our future videos. Lastly, I mentioned it before, but if you want a bi-weekly no obligation newsletter, it sends you all information about Chicago. You can unsubscribe at any time. There's a link down in the description. Go ahead and sign up for that. And if we can support you in your real estate goals, you're moving here, just text the number on the screen and we can get you taken care of. All right, until the next video, peace.